Welcome back to Seek Strength and welcome back to Seekistan. So recently you might have seen a lot of people have been attempting the Platz squat challenge. So that is the 525 pounds for 23 reps. 525 pounds for people who use real numbers is 243 kilos approximately, so we'll call it around 245 for 23 reps. So we're just gonna, before we talk about how we would actually train for this, we're gonna have a look at Tom Platz's one. Gonna have a look at Juji Mufu's and Joe O'Sullivan's attempt, who recently reignited the interest in this.
Another guy did it with Joe O'Sullivan, did he?
He didn't finish it either.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not sure who he was. His was nice too though.
Yeah.
So here's Tom's original attempt. So he's wearing, I think he's actually wearing a squat suit underneath this, but I don't know, 23 reps, bit of money on the line, as deep as he can get, I'd say.
Look, they're nice looking squats.
Yeah, high bar. I wish we had an angle that wasn't shocking. An absolutely shocking angle.
Fully zoomed in.
Yeah.
It looks like there's a compression cuff in his upper quad. Do you see that?
What? Yeah, on there's a little bandana.
Yeah.
It's the pants for me. Those sweatpants in the early 90s.
No, for me it's the that opaque green belt. They just don't make belts that colour anymore.
How is he on a ball of gear and he's all his hair, you know, which is I'm thinking.
It's phenomenal hair as well.
Crazy hair, yeah. He still has all his hair as well now?
That has to be a dye.
He's a very compelling speaker. They're holding the weights. This is all fake. Oh my god, this is basically a TikTok.
Somebody's putting salt on his head.
That's Bill Kazmaier, not somebody. That's the Bill Kazmaier.
Oh my god.
What number? That's incredible.
That is insanity.
Outrageous. Right, let's have a look at Juji's attempt.
You know when people say, oh, there's nobody alive who could do that today? Mm-hmm. There's literally nobody alive who could do that.
Someone could do it if they train for it.
Yeah.
Jesus, am I seeing 4K?
So jacked.
I was talking about the quality of the lens. Unos. Oh, that's gone through, thank God. Realistically, I actually, you know what? I think so. I've done 220 for 14 reps, and I've done 240 for 9 reps. And I think like for someone like me who's used to squatting high bar, it'd be nearly harder for me to do it just a parallel. Like it'd be more difficult.
Yeah, definitely would. I think it's very different, obviously, with low bar. I think this like very high rep squat challenges are better to be done high bar.
Yeah,
because I think loading of your quads is a bit more realistic, you know, rather than loading up your posterior chain that much for that many reps. I just don't think that's not the strategy.
Yeah, getting a low bar position, you're just not going to be able to maintain that position for that number of reps, that like the time, and you're just not going to be able to maintain that kind of posture. Even resting is going to be putting under pressure, whereas resting with a high bar position at least is something.
Yeah.
So Juji got 10 reps.
The other thing with the high bar position is
Joe.
your stretch shortening cycle is going to be much better utilised.
I love the heat maps on YouTube now. So he's gone pretty high. I'd still call that
that's
high bar.
high bar.
That's kind of high bar position we like for a lot of people. Nice fat bar. I would prefer personally a really whippy bar for this, but I know a lot of people wouldn't prefer it. You'd prefer more consistency with steel plates and stuff.
Yeah, I definitely think in the powerlifting world, if you've been trained with a stiff bar, you'd much prefer a stiff bar.
I want to say these squats are kind of high, but I know they're not.
No.
But it's just an optical illusion.
Yeah.
Because he's got big juicy quads in him.
These are very, very good squats.
Have you been counting?
No.
Damn it.
Surely they say it at the end.
He didn't get it anyway, as far as I remember.
No, these are very good looking squats. No loss of the upper back. No tilting forward. Like good loading of the legs, pushing the knees forward each time. They're very, very good squats.
No, they're great squats.
Yeah.
Incredibly impressive weight for number of repetitions. I don't know what Joe's best squat is actually. They cut him out of the knee wraps at the end of this with those scissors, which I wouldn't blame anyone. Like if Tom Platz was wearing a squat suit.
Yeah.
No, damn. He literally could not have done another rep there.
No.
Do you know when your pelvis has gone like this?
Oh.
You've lost all stability.
It's funny though, you see him failing and like he fails with his knees shoot back a small bit and then he has to tuck his hips forward in underneath, you know?
It's all over.
Which like if you see someone failing a 180 kilo squat, they'll be failing in a similar way.
He got 20 reps.
20 reps, holy shit.
Damn. Safe to say he's got a massive headache after that.
I'd say he still has a headache.
Never doing it again. Let's watch the other fella because he had nice as well. So the other fella looks a lot lighter than Joe does. So we've
remember he does like mid-teens on this.
To be honest, 10 reps at all with this is incredibly impressive.
Yeah.
So this is a really low bar squat. This is very traditional.
Yeah.
But a low bar squat with nice high bar positions. So he's really quad dominant, which we love. Big fan of it. I forgot to count again. Which what can you do? Wearing the worst weight if you choose in the world, like Romeo 4s. Yeah. Do the spotters need to squat with him? I don't know.
It's
these are nice squats.
These are very legit squats.
Oh, it's all over. If you step forward, you're not doing it.
Just imagine the pump in those quads though.
No, I just want of gear in that room right now. In this frame, I would say.
Yeah.
I like the headband. You don't want sweat get into your... You don't sweat get into your eye and starts burning. That's not what you want.
I don't think you're going to feel that sweat.
Oh, trust me. What? Great effort.
Go on.
Well, I'd love to know what your body thinks is happening. Your body must be like, oh my God.
Your body thinks that it's been caught in a car crash and you're trying to lift yourself off.
His fingers are so close to getting mushed. Great attempts from him. Let's see.
He is done.
Number of reps.
Fairfox. I think it's 14.
Fairfox, 17 reps.
17.
Incredible.
Unbelievable attempt.
Right, let's go to the blackboard now and look at how we trained for this. Welcome back to the blackboard. So what we're going to talk about is kind of the 3 different things we feel are very important to actually hitting the squat challenge and beating Tom Platz's number, or at the very least hitting the same number of repetitions at 245-ish for him. Number 1, and this is probably the most important, the most fundamental thing, this is probably the one where you're just not going to be make this up if you decide to start the challenge now. If you're squatting 180 kilos now, you're not going to be able to go, okay, I'm going to try the Tom Platz challenge, and in this training block within this year, I'm going to be able to hit it. That's just something that's not feasible. At a minimum, we reckon you'd want this to be somewhere around 70-75% of your NRM. So 240 odd kilos or a little bit more should be around that 70% mark of your NRM. So this puts you in the region of at least 340 to 350 kilos of 1RM squat. If you haven't done that, at least a reasonable shout of that and a good capability. Now, that won't hold up exactly, but if you're not closing in on that 330 plus squat, there's just no way you're going to be able to feasibly do this challenge at all. So, number 1, big 1RM. I think it's undisputable that if you're not even at least in those numbers, this challenge is going to be so far out of your wheelhouse that it's not going to be possible. Now, number 2, PEDs. Now, we could talk about PEDs, or we could go to Sekistan's resident expert on performance enhancing drugs, Broderick Chavez.
Woo!
Bring him on in, guys.
Broderick, thank you very much for coming back.
Yeah, no problem. Always fun to talk about drugs.
Always.
Did I give it away? Damn it.
So, as you might have seen, a lot of people have been trying the Tom Platz challenge recently. Most recently is Juji Mufu. So, obviously, the Tom Platz challenge is 525 pounds for 23 reps. And, of course, I don't think anyone's dumb enough to think that anyone's doing this without substantial amount of performance-enhancing drugs. And we're wondering, could you just give us, like, what would be a bird's eye view of this kind of thing as you know, like, what would it look like? How would you approach this for someone? Because surely this must be different than if someone is trying to do a 1RM shot put or something like that, you know, or a max distance shot put. Surely it must be, there's some nuance to it.
Well, I think you kind of said exactly the right thing, is how would I do it? Because quite honestly, I think how I would do it is a little different than other people. But real quick, this gives you an idea how important you guys are. I actually made some notes, which I never do when I'm speaking. So I scratched down some real simple notes. And what I put is, on the left side, I put the kind of major physiological landmarks that are pretty easily influenced with pharmacology. And I would say, for instance, phlebotomy, the ability to carry nutrients in the blood, the components within the blood that do the delivery. I would say gas exchange, your ability to respirate. That's a fundamental aspect. The actual cellular energetics, the ability to take whatever's delivered and turn it into usable energy and metabolize it. That's another factor. And then neurology/psychology are also very influenceable pharmacologically. So with those major landmarks, I would say then I would look at either the block of the training that the athlete's in, or in maybe other cases where it's an athlete that is maybe in the actual peaking for the event kind of phase. I would say looking at or kind of diagnosing what is or isn't this athlete's strengths or weaknesses. Look at blood work. What does their phlebotomy look like? Can we fix something? Look at their VO2 max. Can we fix it? Those sorts of things. And even if we don't have like lab diagnostics, maybe just going on historically. Historically, do you gas out quickly? Do you run into lactate problems? What's the limiting factor? Tell me why you failed, and maybe I can find a workaround, kind of thing. So real quick with the blood, I would say you've got the pretty obvious anabolic steroids. Testosterone and anabolic steroids drive the manufacture of red blood cells. That's going to be valuable. There are other drugs that do that. Melanotan 2 is a pretty potent phlebotic driver, as is, going like whole hog to maybe EPO. That drives the manufacture of red blood cells. But then also, not only do you have the sheer volume of blood, but there's also the concept of when blood volume gets really high, blood gets kind of thick and hard to move. Usually not a problem for hyper endurance athletes, but maybe is a problem for somebody with a big body weight and maybe lower daily activity. So maybe we're looking at, this is not a medical term, this is kind of a gray area term, condition the blood. Aspirin, fish oil. Maybe if you're going to go full into the pharmacological side, there's drugs like Trentol that actually change the viscosity, the flexibility, pliability of actual blood cells so that the blood is less likely to aggregate. So you can get away with higher phlebotomy values because you've got this condition to the blood. Okay. So, and then there's a lot more, but I'm giving you the high level. Like that's kind of the basic stuff. Moving over to the VO2 gas side, bronchodilators, ephedrine, albuterol. There's loads of them. Anything that's going to improve the ability to exchange gas across the membrane, make you breathe better. Those are very underrated drugs in athletics. People really don't realize how used those are and how kind of pivotal they are. So there's that. Then moving over to actual energy systems, I'd say insulin's kind of the major player there. Insulin's the major driver of getting shit into cells, and that shit is amino acids, carbohydrates, etc. So I would say insulin probably paired with a strategy of high energy phosphate delivery, so creatine monohydrate, creatine phosphate, that sort of thing, in conjunction with insulin. Then you've also got actual like cellular level stuff. You can actually influence mitochondrial effects with drugs like SR9 9009, 9011. They actually affect the mitochondrial function, so you can short-term upregulate the actual ability to turn substrates into ATP, get it to the muscle cells. That's valuable. Also in that energy system, there's kind of a phantom zone of lactate and waste product consideration. That's a gray area. I'm not going to really talk about the horrible things you would do to influence that, but know that that's a thing that can be influenced. You can affect that. Then moving into, you've got neurology. And neurology is really the kind of the wild card here. You've got your base stimulants. You got modafinil, caffeine, ephedrine that just affect upness. Sure. But you've got even more subtle things. It sounds like a horrible thing to say, but cocaine is both a stimulant and an analgesic. Cocaine is a great painkiller. It's really easy to do shit under the influence of cocaine that you wouldn't otherwise do because you're fuck all motivated and you're less susceptible to the negatives of pain. There are, of course, other drugs in that category, but cocaine jumps out as kind of the, party favorite, bad pun, but, it is. But there are others. Then there's actual sheer nootropics. There's Celank, lots of psychopeptides. And then there's kind of shit that crosses all of these. For instance, injectable choline, injectable carnitine have influences both on energy systems and neurology. So there's that crossover between the two. Estrogen, wildly maybe is a bad term. Maybe not wildly, but estrogen influences fuel substrate utilization. In a higher estrogen environment, you're slightly more likely to use fatty acids as your fuel source. So manipulating estrogen values can moderate joint pain, orthopedic influences, and energy consumption. Again, phantom drugs. Drug's a bad word because some places drug, some places it's OTC, but something like yohimbine can influence the availability of fatty acids and therefore fuel utilization. That's a real high level overview, but all of those things can come into play. Now, admittedly, not all of those are concurrent. Like usually the steroid phlebotomy stuff is done in advance, and then you ride in with that. And then the VO2 stuff is very proximal. The energy system stuff is very proximal. The neurology could be so proximal that it's literally day of. So it's all, kind of time dependent, but those are the kind of the checklist of, this is the stuff we're going to use. How do we get it delivered to event day?
In terms of the phlebotomy stuff, how much difference do you see that kind of making compared to the other things? Like if you use an extra percentage of red blood cells per unit or whatever, do you?
That's the question that people love to ask me. And the answer is, it depends on what you're deficient in. Yeah. If you're an individual that's low responsive in that could be the game changer. The other side of the coin, if that's not your deficiency, that's not your deficiency. So it's a matter of, this is what medications do. They fix deficiencies. And so, whatever your deficiency is going to be the game changer. Now, overall, all of these things will help. Making your strength a little stronger will help, but not nearly as much as making your weakness a little stronger.
Broderick, is it likely in the case of when powerlifters are going to do the challenge like this, is it likely that the case of manipulating their phlebotomy values is going to be a small bit more valuable because their top end strength numbers are probably already going to be there?
Right, because they've worked themselves into a niche of low fitness, high strength. And I don't say low fitness as an insult. I just mean that's the condition they're in. That is. So anything that's going to improve, fitness type outcomes, phlebotomy, VO2, lactate threshold, anything that's going to give them that more athletic kind of overview is definitely positive. Whereas somebody that has those things probably has specialized on those things and therefore neglected neurology and threshold training and motor unit activation and those sorts of things. So the neurology becomes a little more important because that's their deficiency.
In terms of like dosages of anabolics in like all the way up to Mr. Olympia to like female HRT, what kind of are we talking here? Is it like, would people be shocked to see it, or they would be kind of like, oh, okay, that makes sense?
People don't like this answer, but I really believe this to be the sincere answer. Think about just medicine. People love to believe, athletes, I rephrase, athletes love to believe that the medical community offers them no sanity. There's, doctors don't know what I do. They don't understand what I do. They don't know anything about this. Well, on a practical level, that's true. But doctors also, have a decade of education and kind of understand what drugs do. They kind of understand how physiology works. They're not in the fucking dark. Okay. So think about this. You get, I don't know, bronchitis. You have some sort of bacterial infection. You have drippy dick. You have something. Okay. You are prescribed medication based on kind of the expected average outcome. There's a chart that goes, male, 200 kilos, and then you come down, 500 milligrams twice a day is the standard. And you get that. Okay. My point is this. Most people, being center of the bell curve, respond appropriately, overwhelm the infection, everything's happy. There are a few people that don't. So they go through their 7 to 10 day course of antibiotics and they happen to be still sick. The doctor doesn't just throw up their hands and go, well, I tried, you're, tough luck, I'll come to your funeral. No, they give you more drugs. And basically at that point, the bargain is either the drugs or the ailment's going to kill you. Let's see which it is first.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's exactly how athletics works. There's kind of an average. Most people respond in this way, but there are some unlucky assholes that don't. And they just simply have to keep taking more until they either overwhelm the problem or the problem overwhelms them.
Yeah.
That is how it works. And in that same conversation, there's this wee little subset over here that's a hyper fucking responder. and one pill of penicillin and they're over the goddamn ailment. It happens. It's uncommon, but it happens. There's the same thing. There's that guy down here in the corner that one tablet of Anadrol and they're off and running. It's an outlier, but it's nonetheless real. So this idea of what's the correct dosage is the one that's going to get you where you want to go. That's the answer. It's very anticlimactic and almost unsophisticated, but it's also the correct answer.
In the kind of finishing up on this point, I know you have a fair bit of experience having been around in the earlier days of powerlifting, although you're by no means a dinosaur. Have you any experience of either this challenge directly or things similar to this, and the kind of historical background around them?
There's a whole boy. I don't want to make any enemies here, so I'll do my best to watch my wording. One, I've personally witnessed Tom train more than a handful of times, so I can vouch for the fact that in his true prime, this kind of shit he did more or less regularly. Squatting 4 plates for 40 repetitions, squatting 2 plates for 15 minutes straight, shit like that. I've witnessed that stuff. It happened. Okay. And it also, by the way, happened with no fanfare, no cell phones, no nothing. It was just another day at the office. Okay. That's something most people don't realize. Tom lived in a non-internet era where he did that shit because he felt that was the shit that needed done, not because he thought it would be a cool marketing ploy. Okay. That's real important. It also adds a level of weight and realness to what he did that doesn't exist today. So there's that. The other thing is the actual event was FIBO, maybe was that 90, 91, 92, maybe 93. I can't remember the year that it actually happened. Let's be fair and say kindly that was neither Tom nor Fred's golden era. That was not the height of their careers. So I don't want to call bullshit and say, oh, it was fake, because I don't know that, and I don't even necessarily believe that. But I will say that whatever it was lesser than what it would have been 10 years prior.
Okay.
I think that's fair to say. I think a sub, 240 pound, Tom, he was probably at that point, like, 210, 220, max. Like, I don't think that guy was the best version of his squatting capabilities. Same thing with Fred. I mean, Fred was fucking 50 years old and, 200 pounds. I don't think that was the best version of his squatting capabilities. Probably still pretty goddamn impressive. He was Fred, but let's be fair. So much like the recent, Sullivan version, I think the original version was a bit of a marketing ploy and a bit of an event, and not necessarily as real as people want to believe it is. Again, I'm not calling bullshit on it. I'm just saying it was very staged, it was very contrived. It was not that organic, just I'm going to go to the gym and fuck things up kind of thing that Tom had in 1985.
Okay.
It'd be interesting to see what he would have done a couple of years prior in relation to Tom Platz.
Oh, I think if you'd have, waved money at a 1985 and 1986 Tom and said, like, I'll give you $1,000 for every repetition you do, I think he'd still be doing them. Like, I'm serious. I'm not even kidding. Like, I think that would have been an economic, train wreck. In his prime, and again, I don't say this as any hero worship. I don't say this in any way other than it's my honest, deep belief. In his prime, Tom was 100% utterly unhinged and did things that were so wrong, egregious, and inappropriate that they need to be enshrined. Like, it was a master class in a combination of what can be done and quite literally what should not be done.
So the last thing we have on the list then, number 3, is specific work capacity, right? High volume, muscular endurance work that's going to push you towards this kind of event. So a lot of times people will just focus on the kind of 1RM aspect and say we just need to bump that 1RM up. As you well know, if you've done any kind of squat programming, a lot of people will be either better at their high-end 1RMs, or some people might be better at the mid-end kind of 3 RM to 5 RM. Then you have some people who will just be freakishly good at the 10s, right? A lot of that comes down to genetic predisposition and the actual fiber type distribution they have. But what it also comes down to is where they spend most time training. So if you get somebody who spends a lot of time in the high work capacity phases, they're obviously going to have favorable adaptations in that direction. So if you're going to do something and try and beat 25 reps or so at this challenge, you're probably going to want to do some more specific training around that. Now, by no means do we want to start off by doing 80 reps at 200 kilos, then doing 60 reps at 210, 70 reps at 220 or whatever, and go in that direction. That's not really what we mean by this. What we mean is, instead of spending the predominant or the preliminary 10 weeks of your training block in high volume, you might want to spend double that amount of time in high volume, and as you get towards the end of the training block, the volume won't actually drop off that much. So it's spending more time in those higher volume stages, increasing that lactic threshold within the muscle, or your capability to increase that lactic threshold within the muscle, and allowing yourself to just become more endurance adapted when it comes to these high capacity pieces. The final thing I'd say in this kind of specific work capacity area is that you're going to have to gain that skill of just going balls out on sets, right? So you can do all of the really well thought out programming, the really good high work capacity pieces. You can be bringing your 1RM up the whole time. If you don't have that skill of being an absolute maniac and being able to go, as you see on a number of these attempts, until you're kind of passing out or fainting, losing consciousness, if you can't go to that place, which we've seen with multiple people who've attempted this online, if you can't get to that place, it's very, very unlikely that you're going to just get here on pure skill. Like, this has remained unbroken, or appears to remain unbroken for so long, due to the fact that it's so utterly difficult to get there. And unless you're actually pushing yourself very, very hard at multiple points throughout the year or 2 or 3 years leading up to this, it's very unlikely you're going to be able to do it on game day. So I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, comment down below if you've heard more stories of people attempting this. If there's more crazy challenges out there that we could get our teeth dug into, please comment below, and we'll talk to you all again soon.